Hello and welcome to government class. In today's government class, we'll be looking at indirect rule as a system of administration used by the British colonial masters to rule some parts of Nigeria. You would note that I did not generalize it to all parts of Nigeria because indirect rule was not used in every part of Nigeria. It was only used in the protectorate part of Nigeria. I know somebody is wondering, what is a protectorate? A protectorate is a territory that is protected by the colonial masters, but they don't really protect it because they want to protect it. They protect it because they want to exploit the people, their produce, and many more. So the indirect rule system of Nigeria was used only in the protectorate part of Nigeria, and the protectorate of Nigeria was divided into two parts. We have the northern protectorate and the southern protectorate. The southern protectorate was divided into the western protectorate and the eastern protectorate. The western protectorate only covers the Yoruba, more like the Yoruba parts of Nigeria, while the eastern protectorate covers more like the Igbo parts of Nigeria. What is indirect rule as a system of administration? Indirect rule is when the colonial masters themselves, they are not involved in the affairs of the people, but they supervise the affairs of the people. So they leave the normal structure of government used by those people in that territory, in that community, but they supervise their rulers, in quotes. So a more standardized definition of indirect rule will be: indirect rule is a system of administration in which British colonial government adopted as its colonial policy in dealing with the people by using traditional rulers, the traditional political institutions, administrations, cultural and judicial structures as intermediaries, while the British official mainly advised and, when necessary, enforced colonial regulations. So indirect rule was a system of government whereby the colonial masters were not directly involved in the affairs of the people. Unlike the direct rule, they were not there themselves to collect taxes from the people. They were not there themselves to judge the matter of the people. They were not there to oversee the affairs of the people per se, but they supervised those that were doing these jobs. They supervised their traditional rulers. When they give the traditional rulers policies to implement, when they give them regulations, the traditional rulers then impose these regulations and these policies on the people. So it was a system of government whereby the British officials were not directly involved in the affairs of the people, but they used the system of government that was already in place before they came, that is the traditional systems of government in place to rule the people. And then they were only involved with the traditional rulers. They were not involved with the people. So they gave the traditional rulers the policies, the rules, whatever they wanted them to implement, and the traditional rulers then put this out to the people and enforce these regulations. One of the important things we'll be hearing more in the aspect of this class is what we call native authority. Native authority was an institution of local administration of indirect rule in British Africa. Native authority is basically the traditional systems of government in place before indirect rule. The next thing we'll be looking at is the main features of indirect rule. What are the characteristics of indirect rule? The first characteristic of indirect rule is the use of traditional rulers. I really enforce this when we're looking through the definition of indirect rule. Indirect rule, in the system of indirect rule, the colonial masters were not directly involved with the people. They were not involved in overseeing the affairs of the people. They were only involved with the traditional rulers. They told the traditional rulers what they wanted. The traditional rulers would put it out to the people and make sure that it is done. So the process of indirect rule was one major characteristic of indirect rule was the fact that there was use of traditional rulers. The traditional rulers that were majorly the ones who the British officials had relations with, and they made use of the traditional rulers. The second characteristic is the traditional political system of governance already in place was utilized. So it was the traditional system of governance in place that was utilized. If you look through our videos, we have gone through the series. We have gone through the pre-colonial political systems of administration in Nigeria. We looked at the Hausa pre-colonial political system. We looked at the Yoruba. We looked at the old Oyo Empire. We looked at the Igbo pre-colonial political systems of administration. These pre-colonial political systems of administrations already in place that the people of Nigeria were using even before the colonial masters came was what the colonial masters used to govern the people. So they rode on this. They rode on the fact that they already had a political system in place, and that was what they used. So the traditional political system of the people that they already used even before the colonial master came was what the colonial masters rode on, and they used to govern the people. That thing is, there was respect for the customs and traditions of the people. The customs and traditions of the people was respected. They did not try to change their customs. They did not try to change their traditions. They did not try to say, oh no, you can't have this your regular fishing festivals that you have, or no, you can't go to the shrine at this point in time. In fact, when we go through the remaining characteristics, you will see that it was the native courts of the people that were used. It was the native police of the people that were used. Their native treasurers were used. They did not try to change the customs and traditions of the people. They followed the customs and traditions of the people. The most important thing that I want us to remember is the fact that though they were not directly involved, they were in the backgrounds. They supervised the affairs. They related more with the traditional rulers. They told the traditional rulers what they want, and the traditional rulers then enforced these policies on the people. The third thing is respect for the culture of the people. The culture of the people in the indirect rule system, they respected the culture of the people. The culture of the people were respected. You would see that in the fact that they did not change the political system in place. They did not change the rulers of the people. They used what was already in place. So they respected the culture of the people when they came there. The next is the indirect rule system was not an expensive system of administration. The indirect rule system was not expensive. It was very, very cheap because the people that were involved, they were paid peanuts. They did not pay them well. And the people that were involved were the traditional rulers. But the things they gave these traditional rulers, to them, it was a lot. They would give them a bottle of gin. They would give them umbrellas. Just very, very insignificant things. But to our traditional rulers at that time, it was like a lot. So the indirect rule system was inexpensive. One, because they were using less British officials. There was no use for British officials because of the fact that they were already using the traditional rulers. They only needed a few of them just to oversee the affairs of the people and supervise where need be or enforce colonial regulations. So indirect rule system was very inexpensive, and also the traditional rulers that they used, they were paid peanuts. They did not really pay them so much. So it was a very inexpensive system of administration. Collection of taxes was also a main characteristic of the indirect rule system of administration. Collection of taxes was a very important aspect of the indirect rule system of administration. Taxes were collected regularly from the people, and for the Igbo part of Nigeria, where taxes was not something they were used to, they didn't pay taxes. It was very tough for them, but we'll look into that when we go into details in the class. But taxes was one of the major major characteristics of the indirect rule system, because they needed these taxes in order to ensure that the administration was running well and was running fine, and that things were going the way it's supposed to go. The next thing is the native courts were used for administration of justice. The native courts of the people were used for administration of justice. So if we go to the Northern Protectorate, you will remember that when we looked at the Hausa pre-colonial system of administration, when you go through our videos, the native court in the Hausa pre-colonial times, the court was called what we call the alkali judges. So even after the British colonial officers came to the northern Nigeria, when they used indirect rule, one of the characteristics of indirect rule was the fact that they did not have to change the courts of the people. They did not have to be the one in charge of administration of justice. They respected the culture of the people, they respected the traditions of the people, and they respected the fact that these people already had a court in place, their native courts in place, and then they used the native courts of the people. So the native courts of the people were used, for example, just like we had just like we had in the Yoruba times too, the judge, the person that judges the matter was still the person that judges the matter. The person that administers justice was still the one that administered justice. So there was no change in the administration of justice. There was no change in the judiciary system of their government. It was what was in place before that was still used. The next thing is the native police and prisons were utilized in this system. So it was their native police, their native prisons that they still used in the system. So the Madwaki was still the Madwaki. The Dogari for the Hausa were still their Dogari, their police, and then the people that were the police for the age groups who acted as the police for the Igbos in the Igbo pre-colonial times were still the ones that were acting as the police. So the native police and prisons of the people were utilized in this system. They did not change their police, they did not change their prisons. The next thing is the native treasurers served as the custodians of the tax collected. So the Maji was still the Maji for the Hausas, and the Bales and the village heads that collected taxes and tributes for the Obas and their Alaafins in the Yoruba pre-colonial times were still the ones collecting the taxes for the people. So the native treasurers also were still the native treasurers even after indirect rule came into Nigeria. There was no change in the treasury. The people that were the treasurers were still the ones that collected taxes. The British did not go to the people to collect taxes by themselves. The treasurers collected the tax, then they gave it back to the British. So the native treasuries were still the one used, and the native treasurers served as the custodians of the tax collected.